And hello, I am Rhea Gertken with Nevada Legal Services in our Reno office, and you have joined us for our Thursday live presentation about the Eviction Moratorium, specifically Directive 43 and the extension of the Nevada Moratorium. And I have David with me again. David, hello.
Hello, I'm David. I'm in Coffee Shop Alpha on Planet Xenon.
That does look like some sort of strange extraterrestrial device. So I know I commented on that
Alpha,
last.
it's a top secret lab. Only the best coffees are served here.
Well, all right. So we're talking about the eviction moratorium today. The last live stream we did about the moratorium, David, was the day that the governor actually announced the extension, and you were attending the press conference.
You could say that, hearkening back to what, March 31st, the moratorium was going to end at 11:59 p.m. And so Governor Sisolak extended it until the end of May, which of course is helpful. Any time is helpful. It is a little bit curious though. The CDC moratorium ends at the end of June, and you know why we here in Nevada end at the end of May. That's a little bit unclear. What Governor Sisolak said is, did you see what I see, by the way?
Nope. Did something happen?
A thin strip to the presentation. Anyway.
Oh, sorry, I will fix
what
that.
Governor Sisolak hinted at was that when people serve notices, when landlords serve notices throughout June, they will have information regarding rent assistance. Rent assistance is for a lot of people like unemployment assistance. It's very, very slow. And the idea was that we could get this money, these tens of millions of dollars, to people by extending the moratorium till the end of May or perhaps till the end of June.
All right. And it does just amend Directive 36. I do apologize. It looks like I'm still having some technical difficulties with the PowerPoint. So I might have to reshare my screen. So if it looks funky, David, just let me know.
I will. I'll raise my hand.
Yes, but it does just extend and amend essentially Directive 36. So while there's not much new, there is some new, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today.
And just, we've said it before.
So it does, there was an amendment. Sorry, what, David?
Sorry, I don't even want to cover this because I know I'm going to be proven wrong. But I would be very dubious about any extensions of the moratorium. And I know I've said it before, it's not going to be extended, but it has been. But I mean, if we're opening the entire economy June 1st here in Nevada to everyone to catch COVID, I would have a hard time seeing extending the moratorium, and unless the governor admitted to a big mistake and opening, the economy too soon and having sort of a fourth wave of COVID infections. So, I don't even know why I stepped into this pile, but I would be very surprised if the governor extended the moratorium beyond May 31st.
I mean, yes, considering the reopening plan is full steam ahead, I have to agree with you. That will, I'm sure we're going to do another live stream to more specifically talk about the differences between the CDC moratorium and the Nevada moratorium, but the CDC moratorium does go through June 30th still, so.
Right.
And they're not dissimilar enough that it should make a huge difference, but, we will.
Jaded, cynical people watching, Governor Sisolak always, it's like a roller coaster ride. He takes us up to the edge and then pulls us back. I don't think he's going to do that anymore. And I think people really need to figure out what they're going to do about paying the rent and, keeping a roof over their heads.
And we will touch on the status of rental assistance at the end as well.
Sorry.
But in all particulars, I guess the bottom line is the moratorium didn't really change that much. Didn't really change at all. There's a couple of new provisions, but the principle is still the same. You still have to be a covered person. It still has to be a covered eviction. And the tenant has to serve the declaration on the landlord. So the protection is still not automatic. If you're a tenant and you want to avail yourself of the eviction moratorium, you are required to serve your landlord with a copy of a declaration stating that you are a covered person under the moratorium. That's true of the CDC declaration or the CDC moratorium, and still true for the Nevada moratorium. You do want to have some sort of proof that you served it on the landlord. I would suggest you do that. It could just be that you sign at the end, after you sign the declaration, you sign a certificate of mailing at the end that says, I mailed the landlord a copy on X date. Or if you hand deliver it, just say, I hand delivered it to the landlord on X date. And just have that, in our version that we have on our website, that there is a certificate of service that's attached. You could also have the post office help you with that. With a certificate of mailing or sending it certified mail.
What process servers do is they tape it to the door and then they take a picture of it. So you can do that too.
Right. Because it isn't whether or not you've given the declaration to the court. The operative fact here is whether you've actually given the declaration to your landlord. One thing that, before we move on, just make sure it does still apply at any stage of the eviction process. But if you've already been locked out, this doesn't apply to you anymore. So just make sure you have to give the declaration to your landlord before you're actually evicted. If you wait too long, you might not be able to convince a judge that you availed yourself of the protections of the moratorium. So you do need to make sure that you have proof of service and that you do this before you're locked out.
And also, even though you've given the declaration to the landlord, you still, if you do get any eviction notice, you must address it. You must respond to it.
Right. And we do talk about that, and we'll address that later as well. But it is really important that don't just assume giving your landlord the declaration means that you're all good and you can't be evicted. Because of the way Nevada's landlord tenant law works, you can actually be evicted without notice if your landlord has given you a pay rent or quit notice. That's the only notice you're entitled to receive until you get the lockout order from the sheriff. So keep in mind, if you've gotten a non-payment of rent notice and you've served your landlord with a declaration, please also file a tenant's affidavit with the court. But one thing that did change is that Directive 43 requires a new notice be sent by landlords with the eviction notice. And this is actually more explicitly advising tenants that they have a right to the moratorium protections, that there is a declaration that they can fill out and submit and give to the landlord. And they actually have to be issued a copy of that declaration, and then give information on rental assistance programs. So if you are a tenant and didn't know about this before, your landlord now has to notify you. And there's actually a form that's provided by the state with the directive. And then just a couple of notes. If you've already given your landlord a copy of the declaration, you do not have to reserve your landlord a copy now. If you've already got proof of service, you said you're a covered person, nothing has changed. You're still protected by either the CDC moratorium declaration or Directive 36 declaration if you've already given that to your landlord. The only circumstance where you're not protected is if you were previously denied. If you already had a hearing and the judge said, I don't believe you're a covered person, it is possible that you are no longer protected. I think if something has changed, I would certainly argue that you are now a covered person if you weren't before. But again, you do have to qualify as a covered person for this to apply.
I don't know how you'd still be in the apartment if a judge found there wasn't basis for the declaration.
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about that.
Probably not. And then, as David said, you still owe rent, you still owe late fees. Nothing has changed with that. The landlord can still fight the declaration. So this is why it's really important that you contest, that you actually file a tenant's affidavit if you've gotten an eviction notice. Because your landlord can challenge the declaration, if the landlord doesn't believe that you're a covered person, you could still be evicted. There are supposed to be sanctions if the landlord files a frivolous challenge. I have not seen any sanctions being awarded. But if a landlord has challenged multiple covered persons declarations frivolously, I would hope the court does something about that. But who knows? All right. And then we mentioned that this moratorium ends on May 31st. Whether or not it's extended again, David's cynical. I don't know. Maybe if things are worse, it will. But I mean, we're kind of moving on a trajectory at this point, I think, of reopening. But the CDC moratorium does still remain in effect through June 30th. While Directive 43/36 applies specifically to no-cause evictions, the CDC moratorium still also should apply to no-cause evictions. It's unfortunate that there is some dispute about that right now, but there is no legal basis to say that the CDC moratorium does not apply to no-cause evictions. The Directive 43 doesn't require tenants to make partial payments or seek rental assistance. The CDC moratorium does. Although the CDC moratorium was, issued to protect people who have been in dire circumstances because of COVID, there is no explicit COVID tie like there is in Directive 43. Otherwise, they're very similar. And David, do you want to talk about the recent CFPB opinion?
Well, you have a new administration, so they're more vigorous about enforcing protections for consumers. And one of the things that CFPB decided to do is basically issue a rule that says if you're a debt collector and you're issuing an eviction notice during the CDC moratorium, it violates the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. A lot of assumptions are made there. The rule does mean something, and a debt collector is not the manager, is not the landlord, but a law firm or a company that does evictions. They would be a debt collector under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. And if they issue an eviction notice to you and you've issued a CDC declaration to your landlord, that would violate the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. I think it's more about a warning. It's more about an overall purpose, which is to help people avoid getting eviction notices during the CDC moratorium. In terms of a valid cause of action, I don't know if that much litigation is going to arise out of it. And to me, it's just a protection. It's just a warning that people shouldn't get eviction notices during the CDC moratorium.
Right. Shouldn't being the operative word. Of course, we know that still happens.
Right. I mean, we also know like 3 federal courts have ruled that the CDC moratorium is unconstitutional. So, there's this problem, I guess, in Austin, Texas, where landlords are, the city has basically said we have a moratorium on eviction, but the CDC moratorium has been overturned in Texas. So you just have this tension and this need for landlords to evict people, even though we're in the middle of a pandemic and it's not in the public health. It's not in the interest of the public health.
The mediation program is also still in effect. So if all else fails, if you've gotten a non-payment of rent notice, you can still request mediation. Yes, David.
It doesn't really make sense that they've extended it to June 30th, because that's when the CDC moratorium is extended to. So July 31st would have been made a little bit more sense. The problem is they're relying on CARES Act money and to fund the mediators, and maybe they're running out. I don't know. I just think a lot of business is going to be generated in July, not in June, and why they would end it, a month before all that business. I guess, they do what they can. Yeah.
And it does, the one thing it does allow for is time for rental assistance. And I know for a while, some of the rental assistance programs were expediting claims that were in mediation. So that is always a benefit. but just as we've said before, make sure that any agreement you actually sign is something that's realistic for you, because if you can't come to an agreement, you still get a hearing. And the moratorium still may apply if you've, served your landlord with a declaration. The one thing Directive 43 did say is that it does not stop the mediation process. So mediations can still happen right now. So it is possible that you could come to an agreement with your landlord, try to get rental assistance. Remember, rent is due still. So it isn't necessarily a bad thing as long as you have a plan for actually entering into an agreement. And then, there was this high idea in the beginning that, ESD or DETR and, the rental assistance programs somebody would be there and available and attend the hearing and say, yes, we can give people their benefits. And yes, we can give people rental assistance. No, that's not happening. It is unlikely that anything will come of that, other than, like I said, if you have started an application for rental assistance, you can try to speak with the rental assistance program to expedite that process. Don't expect anything from DETR. That's about all I'll say with that.
And the bottom line is you get 30 days or at the most 30 days. So it doesn't hurt to request mediation. It's going to get you more time. A 7-day notice is way too short, especially during the pandemic. And requesting mediation can get you some extra time. At the very least, collecting a check, disability check or something like that, that could help you move. It could help you, post a security deposit or first month's rent.
And as David said, it is tied to COVID and the CARES Act funding. So there are a lot of forms that you have to fill out. You also have to sign this affidavit that says that it's COVID related. That is to pay the mediator the fee for the mediation. If it's not COVID related, the rules still exist. There is still a mediation program. Now, the problem is that the mediator is going to be told that they have to do that mediation pro bono. So who knows? But there is on the Home Again Nevada's website, there are forms, information about the program if you're interested. But essentially how you request mediation is when you file your tenant's affidavit to contest your non-payment of rent notice, there on all of the court forms now, there will be at the top a section that talks about requesting mediation. So just fill that out, get it filed, and the mediator will contact you. There is a question that we've gotten about rental assistance programs. We will address that in just another minute. Before we do, one of the things we have also been talking about is, what if you're not a COVID person? What if mediation was unsuccessful? What happens then? So you have a couple of options depending on where you're at in the process. If you believe the judge made a wrong decision, like we have had judges that have denied that a no-cause notice is covered by the CDC moratorium. If that happens, you can file an appeal. In order to stay in your unit pending the appeal, you do have to pay a $250 bond. But all of the other filing fees, if you're low income, obviously I would assume you can't pay the filing fee if you can't pay your rent. And there is a possibility that you could be successful in an appeal, but an appeal is somewhat difficult. It does require extra work. So if you're in that situation, please feel free to give us or another program a call.
Just that last sort of bullet point is important. These, you could think by filing an appeal, it's going to take years. No, it doesn't take years, especially in Clark County. There's a special judge who processes these appeals quite quickly. And I guess the most you could reasonably expect is a couple of weeks.
In the north, it is different. It does take slightly longer, but essentially you still have a problem of ongoing rent payments. So just be prepared to contest the next month's eviction notice if you get one. You can also file a motion to stay if you just need a little bit more time to move. A judge can grant 10 days additional time before you're actually locked out. If you've already been locked out, you can file a motion to vacate the eviction if you have cause to do that. Or you can file a bankruptcy, and bankruptcies have what's called an automatic stay. Again, that time period might be short.
Well, yes. That's why it says at the top, desperate times call for desperate measure. I mean, these are not things that you're going to do if you're completely in control of the situation. These are things where your children are sick, or you're sick, or you just don't have the money. You just want to do something to stop the eviction. And so, like, filing with a fee waiver in bankruptcy court can get you like 2 or 3 weeks. You're abusing the bankruptcy system, but you're doing it because you have no other choice. So, I mean, there's worse things in the world to do. And if you really need a roof over your head for a short period of time, these are some of the desperate things that you can do to stay in your house and give you some extra time.
And that's basically, again, an appeal might end up overturning the eviction, but the rest of this is really just to buy you time. And then finally, rental assistance. As far as I understand, all of the programs that had rental assistance still do. So they had CARES Act that was extended. They got more. And I've heard from the programs in the North, both the City of Reno and the Reno Housing Authority, that they have rental assistance funds available. If you've applied and been denied, we also have limited rental assistance funds. So if you have already sought our assistance and are a client of ours, please feel free to contact your advocate and let them know that you need rental assistance. Otherwise, if you're facing eviction, you need to move, you're facing a utility shutoff, you can give us a call and we can see if you qualify for our program. Just be aware that, the funds are limited and we don't have a lot of staff to process the application. So just be patient if you do end up giving us a call.
Right, we got a private grant from Anthem Healthcare, and it's a limited amount, but it can really make the difference for a few people. And that's basically it, a few people. And people who are waiting for CHAP here in Clark County, you're just waiting for somebody to process their rent assistance application. We can do it a lot quicker here. We have less money, we can help less people, but we can do it a lot quicker.
But that is basically it for this presentation. As I said, we primarily wanted to focus on going over the particulars of Directive 43 because our last presentation was sort of cut short by the extension. But feel free, if you have any other questions, post them in the comments or the chat. And again, just, give us a call. Here are our toll-free numbers. You will be connected to eventually an intake worker, and again, be patient. Our call volume is high, so somebody will call you back if you leave a message. So make sure you leave us a good phone number. As somebody mentioned in the chat, we also do have an online intake system. You can fill in an online intake and somebody will be in contact with you, hopefully within 48 hours. So if you have any questions about this or any of the other programs, and I'll put the rental assistance information back up on the screen, please feel free to contact us. But that'll do it, unless you have any final thoughts, David.
No, again, it's if this moratorium, the one in Nevada and the CDC moratorium are ending, at some point this rent will have to be paid. And I think it's important for people to think about that, what they're going to do, how they're going to deal with the landlord. And the point is there's rent assistance available, and we can help you if you need help defending the eviction or with mediation.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, David, but that'll do it for today. And we will see you in 2 weeks for another Thursday live with Nevada Legal Services Now. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.